You broke him, Meghan. Now you want us to fix it? The words were sharp enough to slice through the tense silence in the room, hanging in the air like a poisonous fog no one dared to breathe. For a split second, Meghan Markle stood frozen, her face betraying both shock and fury as King Charles, his voice low but seething with years of pent-up frustration, delivered a message that would reverberate through every corridor of Buckingham Palace and beyond. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. This was not supposed to happen. The Duchess of Sussex had arrived under the guise of concern, pleading for unity and reconciliation after news broke that Prince Harry, her husband, her partner in exile, had been diagnosed with an aggressive, stage 4 autoimmune disease. But what Meghan found instead was a monarch unwilling to extend the hand of comfort. It was a moment both intimate and explosive, and yet somehow, it slipped into the public domain like a spark falling on dry grass. Insiders claim that the walls of Windsor have never been thinner, their secrets leaking like a cracked dam as the royals scramble to maintain control. And now the world is asking, has Harry's years-long battle with mental strain, public scrutiny, and family division finally pushed him past the breaking point? Or has the damage been done not by the institution, but by the woman who vowed to protect him from it all? This is not merely a story about a man's declining health. It's about power, betrayal, and a family feud so vicious it threatens to eclipse every royal scandal that came before it. In the next moments, you will uncover how Prince Harry's rare and deadly diagnosis came to light, why Meghan Markle is being accused of breaking him down emotionally, and how one blistering statement from King Charles has set the entire royal household ablaze. The calm before the storm. It began quietly, as these things often do. Prince Harry, once the boisterous, mischievous younger son of Diana, had become almost unrecognizable to those who knew him best. Friends described him as pale, withdrawn, and easily fatigued. In Montecito, locals whispered of ambulance visits to their gated mansion late at night. But in true royal fashion, nothing was confirmed. For months, palace officials dismissed growing concerns about Harry's health as unfounded speculation, even as rumors swirled that the Duke of Sussex was undergoing tests for an undisclosed illness. Then came the leak. A well-placed source within the royal medical team revealed to a British tabloid that Harry was suffering from a rare autoimmune disease, one so aggressive it had been silently attacking his organs for months, possibly years. The report linked his condition directly to chronic mental stress and emotional trauma. The years of psychological pressure, the endless public battles, and the strain of living caught between two worlds have left his body unable to fight back, the insider claimed. Almost overnight, the world's media pounced. Headlines screamed of Harry's decline, paparazzi stalked the streets of Montecito hoping for a glimpse of the prince, and commentators questioned how things had come to this point. For Meghan, it was a PR nightmare and a personal tragedy rolled into one. Meghan's desperate gamble. According to multiple royal commentators, Meghan reacted to the news in a way few could have anticipated. Rather than retreating into silence, she reached out to the very institution she had spent years accusing of cruelty and neglect. She wanted to come back to London, not permanently, but to ask for help, one palace insider revealed. She believed Harry's best chance at recovery lay in reconnecting with his family and ending the war between them before it was too late. It was a stunning reversal. Meghan, the Duchess who told Oprah that royal life was akin to a prison, now pleading for its support to save her husband's life. But when she arrived at Windsor for a private meeting with King Charles, what she encountered was not the warm embrace she had hoped for. The confrontation. Eyewitnesses described the atmosphere inside Windsor Castle that day as thick with tension. Charles had agreed to meet Meghan alone, reportedly at her insistence, while Camilla and senior aides kept their distance. Meghan spoke first, her voice cracking as she expressed regret for the painful words and actions that had passed between her and the family. She told Charles she feared for Harry's life and asked that the family put their differences aside for his sake. But Charles, who had grown weary of what he saw as Meghan's manipulations, was unmoved. "You broke him, Meghan," he is alleged to have said, his voice tight with anger. "You isolated him, drew him away from everyone who loved him, and now you want us to fix it?" Those words, once spoken, could not be taken back. Meghan reportedly left the meeting in tears, whispering to aides that the king had turned his back on his own son. But Charles's inner circle insists he was simply speaking hard truths. Truths that had been festering since Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties years earlier. The leak heard around the world. It remains unclear how this private exchange made its way into the public sphere, but within hours of Meghan's return to Montecito, the British press had the story. Meghan begged for help, Charles refused, blared one headline. You broke him, the king's savage words to Duchess, declared another. Social media erupted in a firestorm of debate. Some users praised Charles for standing firm against a woman they believe has fractured the royal family beyond repair. Others condemned him as cold and unfeeling, arguing that Harry's illness should have prompted compassion, not condemnation. And through it all, Harry himself has remained silent. The question that haunts the palace. Now, as the Duke of Sussex fights for his life, the world is left to wonder, can this broken family come together in time to save him? Or will years of resentment and recrimination seal Harry's fate? And perhaps the more troubling question is this. If Charles's words were meant to wound Meghan, have they also doomed any hope of Harry returning to the fold? This is only the beginning of a story that grows darker and more tangled the deeper you go. The cracks in the House of Windsor have widened into chasms, and the next steps taken by Meghan, Charles, and the rest of the royal family may determine not only Harry's survival but the very future of the monarchy itself. The news of Prince Harry's illness did not come in the way most royal updates do. There was no official press release, no carefully worded statement from Buckingham Palace, no polished photograph of Harry standing resolute in a tailored suit as the world waited for reassurance. Instead, it arrived like a storm tearing through the calm, whispered in corridors, leaked by anonymous sources, and spread like wildfire across social media before anyone in the monarchy could stop it. At first, it was dismissed as tabloid rumor. A few obscure online outlets began reporting that Harry had been seen entering a Los Angeles clinic late at night, accompanied by a somber Meghan and two unidentified men believed to be private security operatives. The photos were grainy, the headlines sensational, royal in crisis, Harry's secret health battle. But within 48 hours, more reputable publications picked up the story. Suddenly, the whispers became louder, more insistent. A royal medical insider stepped forward, speaking to a London-based broadsheet under the condition of anonymity. What they revealed sent shockwaves across the world. Prince Harry has been diagnosed with a rare and highly aggressive autoimmune disease, the source said. It is stage 4. The condition is attacking multiple organs simultaneously and has been described as life-threatening if not treated urgently. Doctors believe the illness has been triggered or accelerated by prolonged mental strain and emotional trauma. The statement was as devastating as it was revealing. A body betrayed by the mind. Autoimmune diseases are notoriously complex. In simple terms, they occur when the immune system, designed to defend the body from harmful invaders, begins attacking healthy tissue instead. For Harry, the condition had reportedly taken hold years ago, its symptoms masked by his youthful vigor and active lifestyle. But the damage had been accumulating quietly. Fatigue, chronic pain, unexplained weight loss, all telltale signs that something was wrong. Meghan, according to friends close to the couple, noticed subtle changes in Harry's demeanor last year. He became withdrawn, often canceling meetings and public appearances. He complained of persistent headaches, digestive issues, and joint pain that worsened during times of stress. He thought it was burnout, said one source. He didn't want to believe it was something serious. Harry has always seen himself as resilient, someone who can take whatever life throws at him. But his body was sending out alarm bells, and he didn't listen, not at first. When he finally sought medical advice, the diagnosis came as a hammer blow. Tests revealed the disease had progressed to an advanced stage. Multiple organs, including the kidneys and liver, were under attack. Specialists warned that without immediate intervention and a complete lifestyle change, Harry could face catastrophic consequences. Years of silent strain. Doctors were quick to point out the likely contributing factors. Years of relentless pressure, emotional upheaval, and a lifestyle split between the demands of royal life and the chaos of building a new identity in America. It's not just physical, said a medical expert familiar with the case. We're looking at a man who has lived in a state of psychological warfare for much of his adult life. The constant media harassment, family rifts, and the weight of his mother's tragic death have left deep scars. Chronic stress changes the way the immune system functions. In Harry's case, his body has turned against itself. The public, already reeling from the revelation, began piecing together Harry's long and turbulent journey. From the trauma of losing Princess Diana at the age of 12 to the years of intrusive tabloid coverage, from his struggles with anxiety and depression to his highly publicized departure from royal duties, Harry's life has been an emotional minefield. And now, it seemed, his body was paying the price. Meghan's initial response. When Meghan Markle learned of the diagnosis, she reportedly broke down in tears. Despite their many challenges, Harry had been her anchor, her partner in carving out a life away from the royal institution they both felt had failed them. This wasn't supposed to happen, Meghan allegedly told a friend in Los Angeles. We left the UK to escape the toxicity. We wanted to protect our family. And now it feels like everything we tried to avoid has caught up with us. But Meghan's grief soon turned to anger. According to insiders, she privately blamed Buckingham Palace for Harry's illness, claiming the family's coldness and hostility had driven him to the brink. She believes they've broken him emotionally, said one source. In her eyes, Harry gave up everything to protect her and their children, but the pressure never really stopped. The media circus, the lawsuits, the family drama, it all took a toll. Her frustration, however, wasn't directed solely at the institution. Behind closed doors, she urged Harry to reconcile with his father and brother, arguing that only by reuniting with his family could he find the peace needed for recovery. But convincing Harry to return to the fold would prove more difficult than Meghan anticipated. A family divided in crisis. Back in London, the reaction to Harry's diagnosis was mixed. While some members of the royal family reportedly expressed quiet concern, others viewed the leak as yet another attempt to draw sympathy and control the narrative. People forget that trust within the family has been shattered, said one palace aide. Harry and Meghan have made damaging accusations in public. For them to now come back and ask for help, some see it as opportunistic. King Charles was said to be deeply troubled by the news but hesitant to reach out immediately. Prince William, meanwhile, remained silent, his relationship with Harry frozen since the release of Spare and the Netflix docuseries that laid bare years of sibling rivalry and resentment. It's heartbreaking, said a royal commentator. Here you have a man in the fight of his life, and yet the family rift is so deep that even a health crisis may not be enough to heal it. The palace's silence. As the public clamored for an official response, Buckingham Palace issued a terse statement that only fueled speculation. We do not comment on the private medical matters of members of the royal family, it read. The words, carefully chosen, offered no comfort to a world desperate for reassurance. Were the royals preparing to support Harry quietly behind the scenes, or had they already decided to distance themselves from the crisis? No one knew for sure. The world reacts. The revelation of Harry's illness sparked a global outpouring of emotion. Messages of support flooded social media, with hashtags like #PrayForHarry and #StandByHarry trending worldwide. Celebrities, politicians, and human rights activists weighed in, urging the royal family to set aside their differences. Yet, as is often the case with Harry and Meghan, opinion remained divided. Some blamed Meghan for isolating Harry from his family, arguing that her influence had exacerbated his struggles. Others pointed the finger squarely at the monarchy, accusing it of failing to protect one of its own. Amid the noise, one thing became clear: the world was watching, and the pressure on the royals to act was mounting by the hour. As Harry battled an invisible enemy within his own body, the stage was set for a confrontation that would either heal or destroy what little remained of his ties to the House of Windsor. The diagnosis was only the beginning. What came next would change everything. When the news of Harry's diagnosis was confirmed, the walls of their Montecito mansion seemed to close in on Meghan Markle. Friends described her as a woman consumed by fear, shock, and a sense of helplessness she had never known before. For years, she had been painted as the mastermind of their escape from royal life, the strategist always 10 steps ahead, but now she found herself facing a reality that no amount of planning could have prepared her for. Harry was sick, gravely sick. The man she had fallen in love with, who had turned his back on the crown and family tradition for her, now faced a condition that was silently and viciously attacking his body. It wasn't just physical pain. It was the culmination of years of emotional battles, internalized stress, and unrelenting public scrutiny. And now it was all unraveling at a terrifying speed. The night Meghan fell apart. It was a chilly California evening when Harry returned from yet another round of consultations with his specialists. Meghan had been waiting by the window, pacing back and forth in her designer slippers, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. When Harry walked in, his expression gave him away. No words were needed. Meghan's stomach dropped as she studied his tired eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. "They've confirmed it," Harry said softly, his voice cracking. "It's advanced." Meghan covered her mouth with her hands, trying to stifle a sob that broke free anyway. The sound echoed in the large, quiet room. She rushed to him, wrapping her arms around his frail frame. "We'll get through this," she whispered, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "We'll find the best doctors, the best treatments. I don't care what it costs." But deep down, panic churned, anger rising beneath the grief. As the days passed, Meghan's grief evolved into a burning anger, not at Harry, not at the doctors, but at the institution she believed had driven him to this state. To her, the diagnosis was not just a random twist of fate. It was the physical manifestation of years of emotional abuse, relentless media attacks, and what she saw as the royal family's refusal to protect their own. In private conversations with her inner circle, Meghan didn't mince words. "They broke him," she reportedly said. "They watched him struggle, they mocked him for seeking help, and they turned their backs when we needed them most. And now they expect me to pick up the pieces while they sit in their palaces pretending nothing is wrong." For Meghan, this wasn't just about Harry's health, it was about justice. She saw his illness as a direct consequence of the psychological warfare waged against them since their marriage. The idea of reaching out. Yet even in her anger, Meghan was pragmatic. She began to consider the unthinkable, reaching out to the very family she had spent years distancing herself from. "It's not about me or them anymore," she reportedly confided to a friend in Los Angeles. "This is about Harry. If there's even a small chance that reconnecting with his family can bring him peace, I have to try." The suggestion came with its own risks. Meghan knew that approaching King Charles and Prince William would not be easy. The wounds left by Megxit, the Oprah interview, and Harry's memoir Spare were still raw. But as she watched Harry grow weaker by the day, the prospect of doing nothing felt worse. The Montecito meeting. One evening, Meghan called a meeting with Harry's closest advisors and friends at their Montecito home. Harry sat quietly, sipping tea and staring out the window as Meghan spoke with her usual poise, though her hands trembled slightly. "We need to consider all options," she said firmly. "And that includes asking for the royal family's support." One friend objected. "Are you sure about this? After everything they've put you both through? What if they slam the door in your face?" "I'm not doing this for me," Meghan shot back. "I'm doing this for Harry. He needs peace. He needs closure. And if I have to swallow my pride to make that happen, so be it." Harry didn't speak for a long moment. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, "I don't know if they'll even want to see me. But maybe you're right. Maybe we have to try." Meghan's private appeal to Charles. Determined to take action, Meghan drafted a heartfelt letter to King Charles. In it, she expressed her concern for Harry's health, her regret over how strained relations had become, and her hope that the family could come together in the face of this crisis. The letter was sent via a trusted intermediary to avoid interception by the press. Meghan waited anxiously for days, checking her phone constantly for any sign of a reply. When an answer finally came, it was terse but not entirely dismissive. Charles agreed to a private meeting at Windsor Castle, just Meghan and him, preparing for the confrontation. As Meghan prepared for the trip to the UK, she was filled with a mix of dread and determination. Friends said she spent hours rehearsing what she would say, trying to strike the right balance between humility and firmness. "She knows this is her one shot," said a source close to Meghan. "She's going in there not as a duchess, not as a public figure, but as a wife fighting for her husband's life." Still, Meghan was not naive. She knew she would face skepticism and even hostility. But for Harry's sake, she was willing to endure whatever came her way. The turning point. Meghan's decision to appeal to the family was not universally praised. In fact, within her own circle, some viewed it as an act of desperation. "Why should you be the one to extend an olive branch?" one friend asked bluntly. "They've treated you appallingly. They owe Harry an apology, not the other way around." But Meghan's resolve remained unshaken. "This isn't about who's right or wrong anymore," she replied. "If I don't do this and something happens to Harry, I'll never forgive myself." A storm brews. As Meghan boarded her flight to London, unaware that her appeal to Charles would end in one of the most explosive royal confrontations in modern history, the world remained divided. Was she a devoted wife doing everything to save her husband, or a manipulative figure seeking to rewrite the narrative yet again? The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. But what no one could have predicted was how Charles would react when faced with Meghan's pleas, and how one single statement would ignite a firestorm that threatened to engulf the monarchy itself. The meeting between Meghan Markle and King Charles III was never going to be easy, but few could have imagined how swiftly it would spiral into one of the most contentious moments in recent royal history, a conversation that, once leaked, would set the House of Windsor ablaze and divide public opinion across the globe. Windsor Castle was unusually quiet that morning. The staff had been instructed to keep their distance, aware that this was not an ordinary royal engagement. Meghan arrived alone, dressed in a tailored black coat and minimal makeup, her face pale but her jaw set with determination. She had spent hours rehearsing her words during the transatlantic flight, determined to remain calm and focused no matter how the meeting unfolded. As she was led through the cavernous hallways to Charles's private study, Meghan clutched her handbag tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She was not here as a duchess demanding her place within the royal fold, nor as a public figure seeking redemption. She was here as a wife desperate to save her husband's life. A tense beginning. Charles stood by the window when she entered, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the sprawling gardens of Windsor. For a moment, he didn't turn around. Meghan hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to speak first. "Your Majesty," she said softly, her voice betraying a hint of nervousness. Charles finally turned, his face grave. "Meghan," he acknowledged curtly. "Please, sit down." The air was thick with unspoken resentment, the weight of years of public and private battles pressing down on both of them. Meghan lowered herself into a chair opposite the king, forcing her hands to remain still in her lap. Meghan's plea. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Meghan began cautiously. I know things between us have been difficult. I take responsibility for my part in that. But right now, this isn't about the past. It's about Harry." Charles said nothing, his piercing gaze fixed on her. "Harry's sick," Meghan continued, her voice cracking slightly. "You've read the reports, I'm sure. The doctors say the condition has advanced, and I believe that part of his healing will come from making peace with his family. He needs you. He needs his father and his brother. And I'm here to ask, no, to beg, you to put the past aside and come together for his sake." Charles unleashes his anger. For a moment, Charles remained silent. Then he let out a long, measured sigh. "You come here," he said slowly, his voice low and tight, "asking me to put the past aside. To come together. To heal. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Meghan's eyes widened slightly, but she held her ground. "I've made mistakes, I know that. But—" "Mistakes?" Charles interrupted, his tone rising. "You've done more than make mistakes, Meghan. You and Harry accused this family of racism on international television. You've painted us as villains to the world. You've driven a wedge so deep between brothers that I don't know if it can ever be repaired. And now, when the consequences of your choices have come home to roost, you want us to fix it?" Meghan's mouth fell open in shock. "This isn't about fixing anything," she said, her voice trembling. "This is about saving Harry, your son." Charles's eyes flashed with a mixture of pain and fury. "You broke him, Meghan," he spat. "You isolated him from everyone who loved him. You encouraged him to burn every bridge he had. And now you want me to pick up the pieces? To what? Play the loving father on cue, so you can absolve yourself of guilt." Meghan felt the tears welling up, but she blinked them back. "That's not fair," she whispered. "Fair?" Charles's voice cracked now, raw emotion breaking through his measured tone. "Do you think any of this has been fair to me? To William? To this family? You two have torn us apart, and yet somehow, in the narrative you've spun, we are the villains, and you are the victims." The breaking point. There was silence in the room as Charles's words settled like ash after a fire. Meghan struggled to steady her breathing. She had come expecting resistance, but not this level of vitriol. "I didn't come here for myself," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I came for Harry. Whatever you think of me, he is still your son. He loves you, even if he doesn't know how to show it anymore. Don't punish him for my mistakes." Charles turned away, his shoulders rising and falling with heavy breaths. "You don't understand, do you?" he said after a long pause. "Every time I try to reach out to Harry, it ends in disaster. He doesn't trust me anymore. And I can't trust him, not while he's under your influence." Meghan rose from her chair, her hands trembling. "If you can't find it in your heart to help him now, I don't know if you ever will. And if anything happens to Harry," she paused, her voice breaking, "you'll have to live with that." Charles spun around to face her, his expression hard. "Don't you dare lecture me about my son. You've done enough damage already." Meghan's exit. The meeting ended abruptly. Meghan left Windsor Castle with tears streaming down her face, her carefully rehearsed composure shattered. Staff members later described her as looking hollowed out, her lips pressed tightly together as she was escorted to her car. Charles remained in his study long after she departed, staring into the fireplace with a haunted expression. Aides said he refused to speak for the rest of the day. The leak that set the world on fire. Within hours, the details of the confrontation began to trickle out. At first, it was just whispers on social media. Meghan begs for help, Charles refuses. Then came the headlines. You broke him. Meghan King Charles's furious clash with Duchess revealed. Charles turns his back on sick Harry in explosive private meeting. The public was divided. Some hailed Charles as a man finally speaking hard truths to a woman they believed had manipulated his son. Others saw him as cold, unfeeling, and incapable of offering compassion in his son's hour of need. And through it all, Harry remained silent. The ripple effect. The fallout from the confrontation was immediate. Relations between the Sussexes and the royal family, already fragile, seemed to fracture completely. Inside the palace, aides described an atmosphere of quiet panic. The king regrets the words he used, one insider admitted. But he doesn't regret the sentiment behind them. He feels Meghan needed to hear it. In Montecito, Meghan was reportedly inconsolable, alternating between rage and despair. She tried, said one friend. She swallowed her pride, faced her harshest critic, and it still wasn't enough. As the dust settled, one question loomed over both households. Could Harry's illness be the catalyst for reconciliation now? Or had Charles's brutal words ensured that this family feud would never heal? For the world, Prince Harry was the carefree royal, the so-called spare who could laugh, rebel, and occasionally stumble without the crushing weight of the crown on his shoulders. But those who knew him best understood a different truth, a truth he had tried to mask for decades behind a cheeky grin and self-deprecating jokes. Harry's silent suffering began long before Meghan Markle entered his life. Long before the headlines, the royal feuds, or the Netflix documentaries that painted him alternately as a victim and a villain. It began in the backseat of a car in Paris in August 1997, when a young boy's life was split into two, the part before his mother's death and the part after. That wound never healed. It festered, quietly shaping the man he would become and leaving him vulnerable to the emotional and physical breakdown he faced today. The boy who couldn't cry. Harry was only 12 when Diana, Princess of Wales, died in that fateful car crash. He had seen her 2 days earlier, sharing a phone call that ended too quickly and left words unsaid. When the news broke, the world wept openly. Mourners flooded the gates of Kensington Palace with flowers, cards, and candles. Grown men sobbed on live television. But Harry didn't cry, not at first. I didn't know how, he admitted years later in an interview. I was in shock. I thought showing emotion was weakness. That's what I was taught, to keep a stiff upper lip. That stiff upper lip would follow him into adolescence. But the pain simmered beneath the surface. By the time Harry reached his late teens, grief had twisted into anger. Anger at the paparazzi who hounded his mother to her death. Anger at his father for seeming so emotionally distant. Anger at himself for being unable to protect her. And anger, as doctors later explained, can leave scars on the body as well as the mind. The weight of a royal name. As Harry grew older, his internal struggles began manifesting in ways the public couldn't ignore. Wild parties in Las Vegas. Tabloid scandals involving inappropriate costumes. Stories of excessive drinking and impulsive behavior. They called me the party prince, Harry once said. But they didn't know I was self-medicating. I didn't want to feel anything. Behind closed doors, Harry suffered panic attacks so severe that he would break out in sweats just walking into a room filled with people. At public events, his heart would race uncontrollably, his hands trembling as he smiled for the cameras. The royal family, bound by tradition and a code of silence, offered little solace. Mental health wasn't discussed at the dinner table. Therapy was for outsiders. He felt like he was suffocating, said a former aide. And every time he tried to talk about his feelings, he was met with blank stares or polite nods. The message was clear: get over it. The Meghan effect. When Meghan entered Harry's life, she brought with her a different worldview. Born and raised in Los Angeles, she spoke openly about emotions, therapy, and the importance of mental well-being. For Harry, it was like stepping into the sunlight after years spent underground. Meghan encouraged him to seek professional help, to talk through his trauma instead of burying it. For the first time in his life, Harry felt truly seen and heard. But with that emotional openness came vulnerability. Harry started to process everything he'd been holding back for years, said one friend. It was like opening floodgates. But the problem is, once you open them, it's hard to close them again. As Harry and Meghan's relationship deepened, so too did his estrangement from the royal family. The decision to step down as senior royals, dubbed Megxit by the press, marked a point of no return. The burden of exile. Life in California wasn't the fairy tale Harry had hoped for. Though he was free from the scrutiny of palace aides and the British tabloids, a new set of pressures emerged. In Montecito, Harry struggled to find purpose. He missed the structure of his old life, the sense of duty that came with wearing a uniform and serving queen and country. He became untethered, said a former military colleague. In the UK, he was Prince Harry, the soldier, the patron, the brother. In America, he was just Harry, and he didn't know who that was. The public attacks didn't stop either. British media outlets lambasted Harry and Meghan for their interviews and lucrative deals with Netflix and Spotify, portraying them as greedy opportunists. Social media was even crueler, with trolls targeting Harry's masculinity and questioning his mental stability. Each headline, each viral tweet, chipped away at Harry's resolve. The physical toll. As the emotional strain mounted, Harry's body began to betray him. It started with fatigue. Simple tasks left him drained. He developed frequent headaches, muscle pain, and digestive issues. At first, he blamed stress or long COVID, but as the symptoms worsened, Meghan urged him to see a doctor. Tests revealed the devastating truth. Harry's immune system was attacking his own organs. His body is fighting itself, explained a medical expert. This is often the result of prolonged exposure to stress hormones like cortisol. It's as if his system has been stuck in fight or flight mode for years. The diagnosis was both shocking and strangely inevitable. Harry's lifelong battles with grief and anxiety had finally manifested in a way he could no longer ignore. A family watching from afar. Back in London, the royal family received news of Harry's illness with what one insider described as muted concern. While some courtiers urged King Charles to reach out, others cautioned against it. Emotions are still raw, said a senior aide. There's a fear that any communication could be weaponized. Prince William, for his part, remained silent. Once Harry's closest confidant, William had watched in dismay as their bond disintegrated. William feels betrayed, said a palace insider. He's angry at Harry for airing family grievances in public, but he's also worried about him. It's complicated. The unraveling. As Harry's health deteriorated, so too did his emotional state. He stopped taking calls from old friends. He avoided public events. Even Meghan admitted privately that she was struggling to reach him. He's fading, she confided to a friend. It's like the light in his eyes is dimming. I don't know how to bring him back. Harry's years of silent suffering had caught up with him in the most brutal way possible. The question now was whether there was still time to save him, and whether the family he had left behind would find it in their hearts to try. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was heavier than it had been in decades. The gilded halls and polished marble floors seemed to echo with whispers of scandal and regret, a faint hum of unease reverberating through the centuries-old institution. Prince Harry's diagnosis had done more than shake his immediate family. It had cracked open old wounds and forced a centuries-old monarchy to face an uncomfortable question. What responsibility, if any, did they bear for the condition of the Duke of Sussex? To act or not to act, that was the dilemma now tearing through the heart of the royal household. A family divided behind palace walls. When King Charles first learned of Harry's aggressive autoimmune disease, the news was delivered quietly, almost cautiously, by one of his private secretaries. The king's initial reaction was not one of anger or dismissal, but a long, drawn-out silence that unsettled everyone in the room. His Majesty was visibly shaken, said one aide. There's still a father there, beneath all the layers of duty and pride. But there's also a monarch who's been burned too many times to make a move without thinking of the consequences. Within hours, Charles summoned a private meeting of his most trusted advisors to discuss what, if anything, should be done. Camilla, the Queen Consort, was present, as were several senior courtiers, legal counsel, and public relations experts. The mood in the room was tense. It's complicated, said Sir Edward Young, the former private secretary. This is not just a family matter anymore. The world is watching. Every gesture, every word, will be analyzed and twisted. Camilla reportedly voiced the emotional argument. Whatever has happened, this is still his son. Charles, you can't ignore that. But others took a harder line. Your Majesty, interjected one senior aide. We must consider the implications. Reaching out now could be seen as weakness. Worse, it could be perceived as capitulation after years of public attacks. The ghost of Megxit. For many in the royal household, the scars of Harry and Meghan's departure were still raw. Dubbed Megxit by the British press, the couple's decision to step back from royal duties in 2020 was seen as a betrayal of the institution's core values. It wasn't just that they left, said a former palace insider. It was the way they left, throwing bombs on their way out. Oprah, the podcasts, the memoir. Each revelation was like a knife in the back of the family. In Spare, Harry had accused his father of emotional distance and his brother of physical aggression. Meghan had painted the royal family as cold, calculating, and, in her most explosive claim, complicit in racial prejudice. These aren't things you can just sweep under the rug, one aide said. Trust has been broken. Public opinion, a double-edged sword. Adding to the dilemma was the ferocious public debate playing out across Britain and beyond. On one hand, there was a groundswell of sympathy for Harry. Supporters flooded social media with hashtags like #PrayForHarry and #ReconcileForHarry. Pundits and celebrities called on the royals to put aside their differences for the sake of a man facing a life-threatening illness. Whatever has happened, this is a time for compassion, said one prominent journalist on a late-night news program. If the monarchy can't rally around one of their own now, what does that say about them as human beings? But on the other side of the divide, critics argued that Harry and Meghan had made their bed and should now lie in it. They've chosen their path, wrote a columnist in a leading British newspaper. They wanted freedom, independence, and distance from the firm. It's hypocritical to now come crawling back in a moment of crisis. Within the palace, the fear was that any outreach would be painted by Harry and Meghan as vindication, a tacit admission of guilt for the couple's long list of grievances. William's cold resolve. Perhaps the greatest obstacle to reconciliation was not the king but Harry's older brother. Prince William, once his closest ally and confidant, had grown into a man hardened by responsibility and bitter experience. The Prince of Wales feels deeply betrayed, said a source close to William. He believes Harry has destroyed the family's reputation and disrespected the memory of their grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. When Charles raised the possibility of reaching out to Harry, William reportedly shot it down. We can't keep bending to his demands, William said, according to insiders. It's always on his terms. And every time we try, it ends up in a book or on television. Some courtiers described William's position as cold but logical. Others feared it was driven more by anger than reason. The Queen Consort's plea. Camilla, often portrayed in the media as steely and calculating, surprised many in the room by advocating strongly for a compassionate approach. Harry may not see it now, she reportedly told Charles, but he's still family. If he's truly as sick as they say, he deserves to hear from his father before it's too late. Her words reportedly gave Charles pause, though he remained undecided. The risk of action and inaction. The royal family's dilemma was as much about optics as it was about genuine emotion. To act too quickly might embolden Harry and Meghan, giving them another weapon in their ongoing PR battle with the monarchy. To do nothing, however, risked appearing cold and vindictive in the eyes of a public already skeptical of the institution's humanity. This is a no-win situation, admitted one senior palace aide. They're damned if they do, and damned if they don't. Harry's silence. While the royal family deliberated, Harry himself remained largely silent. According to sources in Montecito, he had grown increasingly withdrawn as his illness progressed. Friends described him as exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Harry doesn't want to fight, said one source. But he also doesn't want to crawl back to people he feels abandoned him when he needed them most. This silence only deepened the palace's uncertainty. Was Harry expecting them to make the first move? Or was he done with them altogether? A kingdom on edge. As the days turned into weeks, speculation reached a fever pitch. Every small gesture, a phone call here, a scheduled meeting there, was dissected by royal watchers and media pundits alike. Would the royal family find a way to come together in Harry's time of need? Or would decades of resentment, pride, and misunderstanding keep them apart forever? And looming over all of it was a question that no one dared speak aloud. What if they waited too long? The tension between Meghan Markle and the British monarchy was never just a family squabble. It had become something deeper, something almost existential for both sides. What started as an awkward cultural clash escalated into an all-out war of words, images, and reputations, a battle fought across continents, media outlets, and living rooms around the world. Now, with Prince Harry fighting for his life, that simmering hostility erupted once again. Meghan's decision to reach out to the royal family, pleading for unity in the face of her husband's diagnosis, had been her most vulnerable move yet. But the palace's chilly response only reignited old wounds and stirred public debate about whether reconciliation was even possible. In Montecito, Meghan paced the polished wooden floors of her sprawling mansion, her mind racing. She had tried diplomacy, but Charles's brutal words had made one thing clear. To him, she was still the outsider who had broken his son. The monarchy, with all its traditions and protocols, had closed ranks around itself, leaving her on the outside once again. A love story that sparked a war. When Meghan and Harry first went public with their relationship in 2016, the reaction was swift and polarized. To some, Meghan represented a fresh, modern breath of air in a monarchy that seemed increasingly outdated. To others, she was a foreign intruder, a woman whose independence and confidence clashed with centuries of royal tradition. For Harry, Meghan was a lifeline. She understood his pain, his longing to escape the gilded cage of royal life. Together, they envisioned a future where love and family came first, far from the constraints of the crown. But for the institution of monarchy, Meghan was a threat. From the very beginning, they didn't know what to do with her, said a former palace staffer. She was outspoken, charismatic, and unwilling to play by the unwritten rules that had bound royal women for generations. That terrified them. The unwritten rules. Within palace walls, the rules are rarely spoken aloud, but everyone understands them. Don't upstage the senior royals. Don't speak out of turn. Don't share private grievances with the public. Above all, never let the world see the cracks in the firm's facade. Meghan violated every one of these rules. She guest-edited British Vogue, gave candid interviews about her struggles, and voiced opinions on politics and social issues, territory long considered off-limits for royals. But her most damning move, in the eyes of the monarchy, came in 2021 when she and Harry sat down with Oprah Winfrey for a tell-all interview watched by millions. The Oprah shockwaves. In that interview, Meghan revealed her mental health struggles, saying she had felt suicidal while pregnant with Archie. She accused the royal family of denying her help and even claimed that an unnamed senior royal expressed concerns about the skin color of her unborn child. The revelations were explosive. To Meghan's supporters, she was brave, finally exposing the toxic underbelly of royal life. To her detractors, she was manipulative, using her platform to smear an ancient institution for her own gain. The monarchy responded with its trademark restraint. Recollections may vary, read a carefully worded statement from Buckingham Palace. But privately, insiders said the damage was done. They saw Meghan as a loose cannon, one source explained. Someone who couldn't be trusted to protect the family's secrets. Harry torn between two worlds. For Harry, the feud was agony. Meghan had opened his eyes to the emotional neglect he felt growing up, but she had also drawn him further away from the only family he had ever known. Harry wanted to protect Meghan, said a friend of the couple. He felt he had failed his mother, and he wasn't going to make the same mistake again. But in doing so, he cut himself off from the people who had raised him. In Montecito, Harry found peace in moments, playing with Archie and Lilibet in the garden, watching the California sunsets, but the weight of estrangement from his father and brother never left him. Now, as illness ravaged his body, that emotional toll deepened. Meghan's anger boils over. After her disastrous meeting with Charles, Meghan was inconsolable. Friends described her as alternating between sobbing fits and flashes of icy rage. She can't believe the monarchy is willing to stand by and watch Harry suffer, said one source close to the Duchess. In her mind, they are choosing pride over compassion. In private, Meghan reportedly lashed out at palace insiders who had briefed against her in the press. They're cowards, she allegedly said. They hide behind their titles and traditions while a man's life hangs in the balance. But Meghan's fiercest criticism was reserved for the institution itself. The monarchy is a machine, she reportedly told a confidant. It doesn't care about individuals. It chews people up and spits them out, just like it did with Diana. The monarchy's perspective. Inside the palace, Meghan's accusations only hardened attitudes against her. To senior courtiers, she was the embodiment of everything they feared about modern celebrity culture, attention-seeking, emotional, and unwilling to play by the rules. They see her as a destabilizing force, said a royal historian. She doesn't respect the hierarchy or the idea that the monarchy exists for something bigger than any one person. For King Charles, the situation was even more personal. He reportedly felt betrayed by Meghan's willingness to air private family matters in public. Charles believes he extended a hand to Meghan early on, said a palace aide. But she swatted it away and then vilified him in front of the world. A war of narratives. As Meghan and the monarchy dug in their heels, the media became the battlefield. In the United States, commentators often portrayed Meghan as a victim, a woman of color crushed by a racist and antiquated institution. British tabloids, however, painted her as a schemer who had ensnared Harry in her web and isolated him from his family. Both narratives, of course, were oversimplifications, but they fueled a transatlantic culture war that only deepened the rift. The illness changes everything, or does it? Some believed Harry's diagnosis might serve as a catalyst for reconciliation. But Meghan's strained relationship with the royals complicated any hope of a clean resolution. Harry's health could have brought them all together, said one royal biographer. But Meghan's presence remains a sticking point. The family doesn't trust her, and she doesn't trust them. It's a stalemate. In Montecito, Meghan reportedly feared that even if the royals reached out, their help would come with strings attached, conditions she might not be willing to accept. A marriage under pressure. As Harry grew weaker, Meghan bore the weight of caring for him and shielding him from the mounting pressure. Friends worried about the toll it was taking on her. She feels like she's fighting a battle on all fronts, said one source. She's terrified of losing Harry and furious at the people she believes drove him to this point. Yet some palace insiders whispered a different narrative. She's using his illness as leverage, one claimed. This isn't about reconciliation, it's about control. Two worlds collide. The battle between Meghan and the monarchy was no longer just personal. It had become symbolic of two clashing worldviews: tradition versus modernity, duty versus self-expression, institution versus individual. And as Harry's condition worsened, the stakes had never been higher. Would Meghan swallow her pride and accept the monarchy's terms if they offered help? Or would the royals risk their public image by refusing to extend a hand? One thing was certain: whichever path they chose, the consequences would be felt for generations. As Prince Harry's health crisis unfolded in the glare of international headlines, an unlikely chorus of voices began to rise around him. Friends, former colleagues, distant relatives, and even public figures who had watched his journey from a distance began to speak out, each offering their own perspective on the man behind the headlines and the forces that had brought him to this point. Some came forward in solidarity, their words laced with heartbreak and urgency. Others, however, used the moment to voice criticism or to rekindle old grievances. Together, they painted a picture of a man loved by many, but trapped in a storm he never truly escaped. A prince's loyal circle. Those closest to Harry described him not as a rebellious royal or a wayward son, but as a fiercely loyal friend and a devoted family man. In the days following the announcement of his diagnosis, messages of support from old friends and allies began to surface across media platforms. Harry has always been the one who looked out for everyone else, said Nacho Figueres, the Argentine polo player and one of Harry's closest confidants. When I heard about his illness, I thought, it's time the world looked out for him for a change. Figueres, known for his unwavering support of Harry and Meghan even during their most turbulent moments, urged the royal family to come together. This isn't about titles or traditions anymore, he said in a televised interview. This is about a man, a father, a husband who needs his family. The Invictus family weighs in. Harry's work with veterans through the Invictus Games had earned him a devoted following among service members worldwide. Many of them spoke out in heartfelt statements, crediting Harry with giving them hope and purpose after their own battles with trauma and injury. He was there for us when we felt broken, said one British veteran. Now it's our turn to be there for him. Social media was flooded with photos of Invictus athletes holding up signs reading "Stay strong, Harry," and "Once Invictus, always Invictus." But even within this circle, there was a recognition of how deeply Harry's own struggles had run. He poured so much of himself into helping us heal, one participant reflected. Maybe he didn't leave enough for himself. Meghan's Hollywood allies rally. In California, Meghan's connections in the entertainment world began to rally around her and Harry. Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, and Serena Williams were among those reported to have offered private support. Harry and Meghan have been through hell, said Perry in an Instagram post. Let's not forget what constant stress and emotional pain can do to a person's health. We should all be praying for healing, not pouring on more hate. Yet, even within Hollywood circles, there was an undercurrent of tension. Some whispered that Meghan's high-profile friendships only fueled the monarchy's mistrust, making them view any outreach from her as a calculated move rather than a sincere plea. Former royal staff break their silence. Back in Britain, former palace staffers began to cautiously share their insights into Harry's condition and his relationship with the family. "He was always the most sensitive of the two brothers," said one ex-royal aide anonymously. "The tragedy of his mother's death shaped him in ways most people don't understand. That kind of grief doesn't disappear, it lingers, and it changes you." Some staffers expressed regret that more wasn't done to support Harry during his years in the royal spotlight. "We all saw the toll it was taking on him," another insider admitted. But the institution isn't set up for emotional care. It's a machine that keeps moving, no matter who gets crushed under its wheels. Voices of criticism. Not everyone who spoke out offered words of comfort. Among Harry's former military colleagues and childhood friends, a few were blunt in their assessment of how Harry ended up in his current predicament. "Harry's always been a good lad, but he's allowed himself to be cut off from everyone who cared about him," said one old friend from Eton. "He's isolated, and I can't help but think that's not entirely his choice." Others blamed Meghan outright. "She's driven a wedge between him and his family," one acquaintance said bitterly. "And now she's asking the same family to save him? It's rich, isn't it?" These comments, though fewer than the supportive ones, were eagerly picked up by certain segments of the British press, which framed Meghan as manipulative and opportunistic. Royal commentators add fuel to the fire. Veteran royal commentators and biographers weighed in, their analyses ranging from sympathetic to scathing. "This is a family in crisis, but it's also a monarchy in crisis," said one commentator on a primetime news program. "The way they handle this could define King Charles's reign." Some suggested that Harry's illness might finally force a reckoning within the royal household. "If not even a life-threatening disease can bring them together, then what hope is there?" mused another. But others warned against over-romanticizing a reunion. "We can't ignore the harm Harry and Meghan have caused," said a longtime royal watcher. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. The public speaks. On social media, the outpouring of emotion was relentless. Hashtags like #SupportHarry and #ReuniteTheRoyals Royals trended for days, alongside petitions urging the monarchy to extend an olive branch. Yet the digital town square also revealed the depth of division over Harry and Meghan. For every message of compassion, there was another of suspicion or outright hostility. They wanted independence. They got it. Now they're crying for help, one user posted. A tide of empathy or manipulation? Through all the noise, one question began to emerge. Were these voices speaking out of genuine concern for Harry, or were they being swept into a narrative carefully managed by Meghan and her allies? In Montecito, Meghan was said to be monitoring the media closely, aware that every statement from allies and critics alike would shape the royal family's next move. "This is the moment where public opinion could tip," said a crisis PR expert. "If the world sees Harry as a man abandoned by his family in his time of need, the monarchy's reputation could suffer irreparable damage." The battle lines hardened. As Harry's circle of supporters grew louder, the monarchy's silence became more deafening. Behind closed doors, advisors debated how to respond to this growing wave of external pressure. "Do we bow to public sentiment?" one aide asked. "Or do we stay the course and refuse to be manipulated by emotion?" For now, the royal household held its line, issuing no statements, offering no visits, and leaving the world to wonder, was this quiet dignity or calculated coldness? A call for unity. In a rare moment of public solidarity, more than 50 influential figures from both sides of the Atlantic released a joint statement urging the royal family to reconcile. "Harry's health transcends past grievances," it read. "This is a time for healing, not division." But as one royal observer noted, healing is hard when the wounds are still bleeding. A man caught in the middle. And at the center of it all was Harry, too sick to navigate the storm raging around him, too weary to intervene in the narratives being spun. "Harry doesn't want more fighting," said one source close to the couple. "He just wants peace for himself, for Meghan, and for their children." But peace seems to be the one thing no one can give him. The British monarchy has always been shrouded in secrecy, but nowhere is that veil thicker than when it comes to matters of royal health. For centuries, illnesses, injuries, and even deaths within the royal family have been handled with the utmost discretion, hidden behind carefully chosen words and strategic silences. Yet in Prince Harry's case, the system of quiet management seemed to unravel, and details of his devastating condition began to leak into the public domain in a way that no one in the palace could control. For those watching from the outside, this was more than just a family tragedy. It was a rare glimpse into the human frailties of an institution that has worked tirelessly to project strength and stability above all else. And for the insiders, it was a terrifying breach of the code that had protected the Windsors for generations. A history of hidden ailments. The royal family's penchant for privacy around health is not new. When King George VI was battling lung cancer, the public was told only of a nervous exhaustion. Queen Elizabeth II, in her later years, rarely disclosed the specifics of her ailments, and Prince Philip's multiple hospitalizations were cloaked in vague statements about precautionary measures. "It's part of the monarchy's DNA," said a royal historian. Admitting weakness, especially of the body, has always been seen as dangerous to the image of the crown. Yet, the leak that shook the palace. It began with an anonymous tip to a British tabloid. A source within a private Los Angeles clinic revealed that Harry had been undergoing extensive tests for unexplained fatigue and chronic pain. The tip-off came with shocking claims. Harry had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, and the condition had progressed to an advanced stage before being detected. Within days, the story had exploded. Other media outlets confirmed the diagnosis with their own sources, and suddenly the secret was out. Prince Harry, the once robust soldier and adventurer, was fighting for his life. The palace's panic. In London, the leak triggered a full-scale crisis. Senior aides scrambled to determine how such sensitive information could have slipped past their tight security. "There was panic at every level," said one palace insider. "Health matters are supposed to be off-limits." The fact that this got out suggested that someone very close to Harry or Meghan had spoken out of turn. Some within the palace pointed fingers at Meghan's camp, speculating that the leak was a strategic move to force the royal family's hand. Others feared it came from a disloyal employee within the royal medical circle. The doctors speak. As the public clamored for information, medical experts began weighing in on Harry's reported condition. Though the palace remained silent, leaks suggested Harry was battling a disease similar to systemic lupus erythematosus or a rare form of autoimmune vasculitis. These diseases are notoriously difficult to diagnose because the symptoms are so varied and can mimic other illnesses, explained a prominent immunologist. Fatigue, joint pain, organ inflammation. It's no wonder the prince may have been suffering in silence for years. Doctors also noted the psychological factors that can exacerbate autoimmune conditions. Chronic stress can alter the immune system's function, one specialist said. It's not a stretch to say emotional trauma may have played a role in the progression of his illness. Meghan's alleged role in the leak. Speculation about how the information reached the press grew louder with each passing day. Meghan's critics accused her of orchestrating the disclosure to garner public sympathy and pressure the royal family into reconciliation. "She's always been media savvy," said a former palace aide. It wouldn't surprise anyone if this was part of a larger strategy. But Meghan's defenders pushed back. "Why would she expose Harry's private pain like that?" asked one friend. "She's terrified for him. The last thing she wants is to see him humiliated in the headlines." Regardless of the source, the leak changed the game entirely. The world now knew Harry's secret, and Buckingham Palace could no longer pretend everything was fine. Buckingham Palace's statement, or lack thereof. For days, the palace maintained its usual stance of dignified silence. But as media pressure mounted, aides debated whether they should break with tradition and issue a statement acknowledging Harry's illness. Some argued that silence made them look cold and uncaring. "People are asking why his family isn't speaking out," said one royal commentator. "If they say nothing, it reinforces the narrative that they've abandoned him." Others insisted that a public statement would only add fuel to the fire. "Once you start talking about private medical matters, where does it end?" asked a senior advisor. In the end, the palace released a short, carefully worded comment. "We are aware of the reports regarding the Duke of Sussex's health. We ask for privacy at this time as this is a deeply personal matter." The statement did little to calm the storm. A media feeding frenzy. With the palace offering little clarity, the press went into overdrive. Photographers staked out the Montecito mansion, hoping for a glimpse of Harry or Meghan. Royal biographers scrambled to provide context, dredging up Harry's long history of stress and mental health struggles. News programs aired debates over whether the monarchy bore responsibility for Harry's condition. Was he the victim of an uncaring institution? Or had he and Meghan made their choices and cut themselves off from support? The royal family's private reaction. Behind palace walls, reactions were mixed. King Charles reportedly expressed concern but stopped short of offering direct help. His Majesty is torn, said one aide. He's worried about his son but also feels betrayed by the way Harry and Meghan have handled themselves in recent years. Prince William, for his part, remained resolute in his silence. Courtiers described his mood as grim and unforgiving. William sees this as yet another crisis created by Harry and Meghan, said a senior palace source. He doesn't trust them not to weaponize any outreach for their own purposes. A crisis of trust. For Harry, the leak was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought global attention to his plight. On the other, it exposed him at his most vulnerable. He feels like he's living in a fishbowl again, said a Montecito insider. This was exactly what he was trying to escape when he left the UK. Yet Meghan reportedly told friends she believed the disclosure might be a blessing in disguise. Maybe now they'll realize how serious this is, she was quoted as saying. The legacy of secrecy. As the debate raged on, some questioned whether the monarchy's culture of secrecy around health had done more harm than good. This could have been handled with honesty and compassion from the start, said a royal historian. Instead, the silence allowed speculation and bitterness to fester. But others defended the tradition. The monarchy survives by maintaining its mystique, said a former press secretary. Once you lift the veil, it's hard to put it back. The question that haunts them all. The revelation of Harry's illness left one question hanging over Buckingham Palace like a storm cloud. Could they have done more to protect him, not just from physical illness, but from the emotional turmoil that may have triggered it? For now, the answer remained elusive. The royal family continued to retreat behind palace walls, while Harry fought his battle across an ocean, alone, but for Meghan and a few loyal friends. The world is rarely united on any topic, but Prince Harry's devastating diagnosis and the subsequent royal silence sparked a wave of outrage, compassion, and bitter debate unlike anything seen since Princess Diana's funeral. From the bustling streets of London to the sun-drenched avenues of Los Angeles, people took sides, emotions ran high, and the media circus reached a fever pitch. Everywhere you turned, on television, online, even in private conversations, there was one question on everyone's lips. Why wasn't the royal family doing more? An international outpouring of sympathy. When news of Harry's stage 4 autoimmune disease broke, the initial reaction from much of the public was visceral grief and concern. Messages of support for the prince flooded social media platforms within hours. Harry was the first royal I ever felt connected to, wrote one user on Twitter. To hear he's suffering like this is heartbreaking. The monarchy needs to step up and show they care. In the United States, Meghan and Harry's adopted home, many Americans expressed outrage at the British monarchy for what they perceived as emotional neglect. Celebrities lent their voices to the growing chorus of concern. Harry is a good man, tweeted an A-list actor. He served his country, he broke generational cycles, and he chose love over duty. Now he deserves our prayers and compassion, not silence. In California, where Harry and Meghan now live, vigils were held outside medical centers rumored to be treating him. Supporters lit candles and held signs with messages like "Stay strong, Harry," and "Family comes first, reach out, Charles." Britain's divided response. Across the Atlantic, in Harry's homeland, reactions were far more mixed. In some quarters, there was genuine sympathy for the Duke. Newspaper editorials called on the King and Prince William to set aside their grievances. "This is a man fighting for his life," one columnist wrote. Surely even the stiffest upper lip must quiver in the face of such tragedy. But in the pubs and cafes of London, the conversation wasn't always so kind. "Harry made his bed," muttered a man in his 60s to a BBC interviewer. "He abandoned his family, slagged them off on telly, and now he expects them to come running? Life doesn't work like that." Tabloids seized on these sentiments, running scathing headlines like, "Sick Harry. Has he gone too far for a royal return?" and "Meghan's plea falls flat. Palace holds firm." Even among those who pitted Harry, suspicion toward Meghan lingered. The war on social media. On platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, the situation exploded into a digital battlefield. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag pray for Harry. Hashtag royal family do better. Hashtag Harry and Meghan. And the more hostile hashtag no way back for Harry. Influencers, activists, and even political commentators weighed in. In one viral video, a young woman from New York tearfully called out the royals. This man lost his mom to the media frenzy, and now he's losing his health because of all the stress and trauma. How can his family sit back and do nothing? It's monstrous. But others pushed back with equal passion. Harry and Meghan wanted independence, said a popular British YouTuber in a reaction video. They can't pick and choose when they're royal and when they're not. The family's not a hotel you check in and out of. The debate became so heated that platforms were forced to moderate comment sections, flagging thousands of abusive posts from both sides. The political ripples. The controversy even bled into politics. A member of parliament in the UK remarked during an interview, "This is a family issue, yes, but the monarchy is a taxpayer-funded institution. When one of its members is in crisis, people expect compassion, not cold protocol." In America, several high-profile politicians commented too. One senator said, "It's a human issue. Whether you're a prince or a pauper, you deserve your family's support in a health crisis." The debate reignited broader conversations about the relevance of the monarchy in modern times, with some calling for reforms and others doubling down on the importance of tradition and duty. Celebrity reactions fueled the fire. Hollywood, predictably, was far more outspoken. Tyler Perry, who had offered Meghan and Harry his home during their move to the U.S., posted a heartfelt message on Instagram. "Harry, you've given so much of yourself to the world. Now let the world give something back to you. Our love, our prayers, and our demand that your family show up for you." Oprah Winfrey, whose bombshell interview with the couple still echoed through royal corridors, broke her silence in a cryptic tweet. "Health should unite, not divide. Families are complicated, but love is simple. Praying for healing for Harry and for hearts." Even Beyoncé shared a quiet gesture of support by dedicating a song to Harry during a private event, prompting wild speculation among fans. Protests and vigils. As tensions mounted, supporters of Harry began organizing vigils outside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Hundreds gathered, holding candles and signs urging the family to stand with Harry and break the silence. In Montecito, a smaller vigil took place outside the gates of Harry and Meghan's mansion, with neighbors and fans leaving flowers and handwritten notes. "He stood up for his wife and children," said one woman at the California vigil. "The least his family can do is stand up for him now." The palace's deafening silence. Through it all, Buckingham Palace maintained its stoic silence. "The king is aware of public sentiment," said a senior aide, speaking off the record. "But this is a deeply personal matter, and His Majesty will not be pressured into action by media campaigns." To Harry's supporters, this silence was proof of coldness. To the monarchy's defenders, it was a sign of strength in the face of what they saw as emotional blackmail. Global media frenzy. International news channels dedicated hours of airtime to Harry's health and the royal family's response, or lack thereof. In Australia, a primetime panel show asked, "Is the monarchy finished if it can't show compassion now?" In Germany, newspapers splashed headlines like "Prince in Peril, Can the Crown Save Harry?" And in Canada, where Harry and Meghan briefly lived after leaving the UK, the controversy reopened debates about the country's ties to the British crown. A moment that could change everything. Amid the noise, some analysts suggested this was a turning point for the monarchy. If the royal family does nothing and something happens to Harry, the public backlash will be catastrophic, said one royal biographer. "This is bigger than Harry and Meghan now. It's about whether the monarchy can still reflect the values of a modern world." Others argued the opposite. "The monarchy has survived abdications, divorces, and scandals," said a royal historian. "It will survive this too. But it mustn't let itself be manipulated by emotion." The clock is ticking. As Harry battled his illness in Montecito, the world's attention remained fixed on Buckingham Palace. Every day without a public gesture from the royals was seen as another strike against them. And yet, for all the outrage and emotion, no one knew what Harry wanted. Was he hoping for reconciliation, or was he too exhausted to care? The world waited. And with each passing moment, the pressure on the monarchy grew heavier, the anger louder, and the consequences of inaction more dire.